Hi everyone, and welcome back to Perspective Podcast with myself, Jess and Millie. And today we're joined with our special guest, Steve Purvey from Kenwood. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me. So my name's Steve. I work at Kenwood. I'm a senior industrial designer there. I essentially design the stand mixers at Kenwood. So we have obviously a lot of different product categories and, food processors, hand blenders, hand mixers, etc. But my kind of speciality is within kind of the stand mixer category at Kenwood.
So obviously you delivered a lecture this morning. Would you like to just briefly explain what was said?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I delivered a lecture on, I called it Industry Truths. That was kind of hopefully got a bit of interest just from the title. But essentially what it was looking into kind of the skill sets that we really value in industry and how that can kind of apply to not just, things that you do in industry, but also to students as well, kind of working on their major projects, or those who might be going into internships, for example. Just kind of the things, like I said, that we value and we look for beyond just, kind of the CAD modeling, the sketching, the rendering, etc.
So what's the difference between a hard skill and a soft skill?
Yeah, so the basis of what I was presenting was around these kind of two skill sets. And I guess typically the kind of the hard skills involve the CAD, the sketching, the rendering, etc. And obviously that's readily taught in academia. And then as you kind of the kind of other side of it is these kind of soft skills. So they're to do with presenting, storytelling, kind of having resilience as well, kind of dealing with feedback on your work. So my point around the talk was kind of saying don't neglect these because they're going to be very important when it comes to selling your work, not literally, but like selling the ideas behind your work to people, and kind of, I guess, giving your work the best shot at making it into the world, into something that's going to be manufactured and ultimately end up in the world. So those are kind of the main differences.
We ask if there's any that you've struggled with kind of developing throughout your career and how that's changed from being junior to where you are now.
Yeah. So it's a good question. I think the ones that I kind of struggled with the ones I struggled with, I guess, were one of the topics that I spoke about today, which was, I guess, building narratives and telling stories was one thing. And the other thing was kind of the more strategic side of kind of product development and design development. When you're kind of starting out, you can be quite, I guess, you're focusing very much on the detail and kind of on the thing that's immediately in front of you. And it's kind of important to kind of consider the bigger picture about how what you're working in, integrates with the world or a portfolio or the brand that you're working for as well. So it's important to develop that. So I struggled with that in my earlier years, and to be honest, some of that stuff wasn't as relevant, as I was kind of in a more junior position. But as I kind of mentioned in the talk, you shouldn't shy away from kind of exploring those kind of those sort of skill sets and trying to kind of exercise those muscles a little bit. It's all going to kind of add to your development and add to you becoming a better and more kind of well-rounded designer. So yeah, I think those are probably the two I'd pick.
Obviously in your lecture you spoke a little bit about the audience and how that's different to a user and stuff. How would you suggest when you're at university or in school that you might exercise those soft skills a bit more detail? Yeah,
so again, around audiences, my kind of, I guess, my key point there was the type of people you communicate and interact with are going to change from your university and then once you go into industry. But when you're at university, I'd say, I guess the people you interact with predominantly are going to be, I guess, the lecturers and the people running the course. So they're going to be looking out for, you're trying to help them understand your decision-making process and, show them your thoughts and your design process. So that's the kind of, again, in terms of their language, that's the kind of language you should be thinking about, and you should be thinking about, again, crafting a good narrative with your with whatever it is you're working on. You want them to be able to understand what you're doing quite quickly, how has your decision making process, or how have your kind of insights formed the final direction of whatever it is you're working on as well. And like I said, once you then go into industry, that audience and that language that you're speaking is going to kind of shift. You're going to start thinking about, one way I described it was, what are the priorities of those other individuals? Is it the design, or is it kind of the cost of the design? Is it the feasibility of the design? Is it how competitive that might be in the landscape, with regards to what the competition's doing? So there's still a massive crossover of what you're doing at university, right? You're still kind of, what you're presenting needs to be feasible to an extent. You need to show thinking in those areas. But it becomes even more important as you kind of then grow into being like a junior designer in industry. And yeah, like I said, it's going to change. You'll be speaking to mechanical engineers whose priority is, like I said, around tooling, feasibility, cost, how long is that going to take to design and develop? And, conversely, you might be speaking to a salesperson who's more kind of concerned around kind of the novelty, the kind of how it fares against the competition. You might be talking to someone in logistics. I don't know. There's going to be a lot of people that your work is going to come across their desk, and they're going to have it. They'll have an input on, right? And which is, again, a little bit different to the university.
Do you think you kind of have ever struggled to kind of balance all those kind of channels of feedback coming into one, and how do you deal with that in your own work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's again another one of these kind of soft skills that I think is really important, is kind of managing feedback and kind of interpreting that in the right way. In my experience in-house is you do have a lot of kind of stakeholders that you have to consider their points of view, not because you're just being nice, but like it's, a lot of it is valid a lot of the time, and it's kind of, like I said, if the success of your idea is going to be dependent on how well you've balanced all of that kind of feedback, right? And it'll change when it'll be slightly different in agency versus in-house. But I think personally with me, it's kind of learning to be kind of resilient. Don't take feedback as kind of personal as well. I mean, it's very easy. I mean, I've had it when I was a junior designer working in an agency and presenting, to clients at their office or whatever. And, they've said certain things or made certain comments, which I take very personally. And it's kind of learning as you go through that it's not worth getting angry about. It's, it's not, it's you're going to get it all the time. And you kind of just try to learn to take what you can from it, right? Kind of see through the smoke a little bit. What's the important takeaway from this? And a lot of the time, it might just be that you're just showing that you've considered something. So, did you look into this? No, I haven't, but I can go away and look at that. It might not change the design of what you're doing, but sometimes it helps put people's mind at ease that kind of direction might have been explored or whatever. So I hope that answered the question.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Really good.
If you were talking about in your portfolio, sort of showcasing not just the hard skills, but also the soft skills. What advice in terms of narrative and being able to show like where your project started and why it ended up how it did? Yeah. How would you personally showcase that in your own portfolio?
I think you need to kind of take a step back and kind of try and judge it from an outside perspective. So it really depends what you're presenting in your portfolio, and what is it you're trying to communicate, or what are the kind of key things you want that person to take away from it. So yeah, I think again it's kind of, that was one of those skills that I spoke about earlier, which I found hard to adapt to, is kind of that more strategic or like top level kind of view of things to kind of help guide direction a bit. I think take a step back, remember like the person that you're presented to is human. How understandable is this information to them? Like somebody who knows nothing about what I'm showing them. And kind of go from there. I'd always try to be very visual when you're kind of like presenting your work. I mean, we're designers. You should be able to present your thoughts and ideas in like a clear and concise way visually. You don't want to be kind of like banging loads of text on there. Again, if you think about when you're applying to jobs, your portfolio is, for someone like me, I'm probably going to have a limited time in my day to review X amount of portfolios, right, alongside my other job commitments. So creating something that's very impactful, very visual, and very kind of I'd get it like very quickly. It is what I would advise. So I'm not saying don't put any text in there. Of course you can put text in, but that's one way that I've personally approached it, and be quite chronological with things as well. Try not to jump around too much with different ideas and themes. Like take people on a journey.
Obviously, when you get a job, it's about balancing your work and your life.
Yes.
From your perspective, have you ever applied for a job or looked at offers and things and thought, actually, no, I'm not sure I'm interested in that because of a red flag or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a massive thing for me. It's a massive kind of tick box for me when I'm looking. If I've in my previous experience when I've looked for jobs is understanding that work-life balance in a bit more detail. Because I have worked for companies where the work-life balance is shifted more towards work. Where I'm at Kenwood at the moment, I think it's amazing for me, the work-life balance that I have there. We do a half day on a Friday, which is really nice. We make up the hours in the week, but just something like that is really lovely to be able to kind of get into the weekend a bit earlier. But I would say, when you're applying and you're looking for jobs, they might not advertise it on the job description, right? They might not readily talk a lot about work-life balance. If they do, great. That's already a good signal. So that would be my first kind of look out, is do they talk about any of that in the job description? And the second bit is kind of just ask. I think if it is a job that you're interested in or a company you're interested in, open up some dialogue with people, whether it be the person who's running the recruitment ad for that job, or you could be as bold to message somebody who works there. I've had people message me in the past, and I think every company is going to be different, and their work-life balance it's going to be different company to company. And I think really to think about when you're applying for work is that you should be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, right? To kind of make sure it's the right fit for you. I think if it's in the job spec, great already about that. And I think I've seen more and more ads online, be it on LinkedIn or whatever, where they do talk more about that and about kind of the benefits, etc. If they are genuine benefits. So that's always a great sign. But beyond that, just ask, I think. And then
I think
that's all you can do.
What would you say, if you were in our position now, so we're going to graduate in a few months, start looking for roles, are there anything that you'd kind of say are red flags in a job advertisement, or if you go for an interview and they kind of say something that you'd maybe say be a bit cautious, or kind of steer clear of certain expectations or things that they'd expect from you in a junior role?
It's an interesting question. I think more and more so, I think hybrid working is more mainstay now, and a lot of companies have adapted that way of working, adopted that way of working, sorry. So I think that might be one of the, either a green flag or a red flag, is that in the job title? Do they cater for that? You might not be bothered by that, but if someone like me, I think hybrid working works very well. So that would be, if they don't offer that and it's kind of full-time on site, maybe that might be a red flag for you, but it might not be. You might have no problem with that. So that would be, I think, one thing. I think of other examples that I might have seen sort of just across job specs.
It's only because I was looking yesterday, kind of internship things for summer, and some of them they'll say really good, and then you'll get right to the bottom. It'll be say please note this is an unpaid opportunity.
Well, I think I think that goes without saying, right? I think if you're asking people to work, then I think they should be compensated fairly.
Absolutely.
So 100%. I think that's an obvious one. I don't think it's a red flag. I think it's the company being transparent, but saying you have to be maybe London based, or you have to be based in this location. So maybe not so much a red flag, but that would clearly dictate your decision there. I've worked in London before, but I was commuting in and out of London, and work-life balance from that standpoint. I was doing an hour and a half each way on trains. So you can kind of see why people might ask for you to be London-based, because it's also, if you're required to maybe do some extra hours, then that it will probably you'd benefit from that with regards to commuting. I think in terms of the hours that you put in as well. I mean, I don't think companies are ever going to advertise it's a 40-hour work week, this, that, and the other. Like, I'm not sure that ever gets communicated, but I think within our job space, I mean, it's not uncommon that you'll sometimes need to work a little bit extra hours beyond what might be contracted, for example.
Yeah.
But it's understanding where that line is, and whether you're happy to do that or you're not. And some places, the culture will be different, and that's just that's how they might run things. But other places will run it slightly differently, and it's kind of maybe that's also a question that you can ask kind of out the gate as a junior designer, is trying to understand, talk to them about. Or even when you go to interview, it's always a great time to ask. Is again, the interview goes both ways, which is, what is the work-life balance? What are the typical hours like in a week? And get an idea from there, because you might not mind working a lot of extra hours, but other people will.
Yeah, so I suppose a lot of it is figuring out your priorities before you're applying to places.
Absolutely.
To figure out where it fits what you want.
I think you need to be honest with yourself about it. I mean, sometimes as a junior coming out of university, I mean, to be brutally honest, sometimes you won't have like a plethora of choice. You might not have like 1,000,001 offers coming in saying, and you can kind of sit down and go, okay, I'm going to consider all of these points. Early on in your career, you might have to sacrifice a few things to get some experience under your belt, and also kind of understand what you like and what you don't like about design, right? Maybe pure product design isn't for you. Maybe it's more, like I said in the talk, CMF is maybe something that you enjoy more of. So I think it's kind of taking that first job and understanding that it might not be perfect, or the hours might not be perfect, and kind of learning to live with that a little bit until you kind of build a bit of experience and you build a portfolio where you can start to pick and choose a bit more readily. But
got a question in terms of when you're recruiting people. Do you have anything, because obviously we've spoken about from our perspective, is there anything we should look out for in terms of employers, but in terms of employing people, is there anything that you look at and think, that's kind of put you off them, or actually maybe it's put them above everyone else?
I think certainly the things that I would look at, just to be clear, I'm not responsible for any recruitment at Kenwood, but I will see obviously portfolios that come through and things, and I mean, it's we're a team, right? So we'll look at stuff together. But for me, kind of I guess the green flags would be, and you can probably work out from the green flags what the red flags would be, but it goes back to what I was speaking about earlier, which is showing competency beyond just, delivering a lovely, sexy design at the end of it, right? It's kind of, okay, what's the, what are you, how are you communicating this? What is your thought process? What is your design process? I want to understand your value as a designer and what you can bring to the organization beyond just like, sketching, rendering, etc. I mean, that's still going to be very important. Like, every team needs people who are super competent in those areas, but it's understanding that a team is made up of, we're not all carbon copies of each other. Everyone's got their expertise and their skill sets in certain areas. So some people might be more competent in, visual communication. Some people might be really competent in CAD modeling. Some people might know a lot about engineering and like more mechanical sort of stuff. So I think part of it is, demonstrating some competencies outside of those core ones, like those core hard skills that I showed, communicated earlier. But also think about think about your own kind of skill sets and where do you think you excel, and like, what value can you bring as an individual that maybe someone else can't? And kind of try and push that forward in your portfolio or your application process. Because a typical question might be at interview, why should we pick you over the next candidate? That could be a question that you get asked, and having an answer ready for that over like, what's unique about me and like, what can I bring to the table that others can't?
You obviously you've learned stuff in your jobs and things, but in interviews, have you ever asked the questions about what you might be able to develop in yourself that you might not have at the beginning. And then
Yeah, absolutely.
takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always asked for feedback from off the back of interviews or whatever, whether you do it at the interview or whether you follow up with an email. I think it's super valuable, and some places will be more forthcoming with how much they communicate back. You might get a one-liner, you might get some really good feedback. But yeah, I've certainly had it. I mean, an example would be I've interviewed somewhere before, and the interview felt like it went very well, but I just didn't have the experience in the types of products they were designing. They were kind of very user-centric, and up until that point in my career, the types of products I was designing were kind of more, I don't know, I guess there were kind of these objects that you didn't really have to interact too much with. They kind of had their function. So yeah, I needed to have either build experience or have more experience with kind of these kind of more user-centered objects and devices, basically. So off the back of that, that might be, I do a personal project. I do some more personal projects in my portfolio. I show some understanding and some competency in that area. It doesn't all have to be either university work or work you've done at another job, for example. Again, going back to the talk earlier, it's what you make of it, and it's if you put in the effort and the time, even if it's in your personal time, to take on a challenge or a project that might not be something you're too comfortable with, but you're going to give it a go and have something to present at the end of it. I mean, that shows some level of commitment. It shows a level of experimentation and kind of that you're trying to add more to your repertoire and your skill set. So don't be afraid of that. I mean, that project that I showed in the talk that I got some damning feedback online for, that was a personal project. Like I just did that in my spare time, because again, off the back of some of the feedback I've had in other interviews was, okay, maybe you should focus more on X, Y, and Z. All right, well, I don't have that. I'll just do it myself and do that. Like, I would encourage that.
Do you think that's like the best way to kind of be kind of multifaceted? Obviously, you said that the industry is so vast and there's all these different areas that you can kind of dip in and dip out of depending on your role. So do you think it kind of comes down to kind of doing it yourself and kind of being like, this is what I've done at work, this is what I've done in personal time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it doesn't. I think try and think about what you enjoy to do as well. So if you're going to take on a personal project to try and help you along at interview or whatever it is, make it enjoyable, make it actually something you kind of you respond to and you're interested in, because again that can potentially dictate the how receptive different employers are to it. If you want to work in I don't know, automotive, for example, and you're trying to make a jump over from, say, product design, but I'm really, as it's gone on, I'm really interested in automotive type stuff. Do some projects around that and like start to do stuff like that if you are going to try and make the transition over into that industry. I mean, one of the guys that I think is going to be doing a talk, Dennis, is a chap who worked with me. He worked for Braun, but obviously Braun is part of our it's within our group. He was super passionate about footwear design, and he's kind of made that his career because in his spare time he's been kind of doing these personal projects and kind of putting it on Instagram and stuff, and he really enjoyed that and kind of he did. I'm not sure if he had any formal education. He'll be able to tell you when he does the talk, but he's done enough that it's now landed him a job in that space. So he's made the transition over from the type of products that I design to something almost completely different.
So what would you recommend, say someone in our position, going to finish uni in a few months, what do you think is the best thing that we can do going forward till we kind of get into a permanent role? Yeah,
so I think obviously do your portfolio prep, get that nailed down, ask for feedback from your peers, ask for feedback from your lecturers, even people you send your portfolio and CV out to. Again, like we said earlier, if you can get feedback from those people to kind of improve, that would be kind of number one. I certainly did the same, and even prior to joining Kenwood, I think I probably did a respin of my portfolio, 3 or 4 times, to try and get it as good as it can be and get to where I need to be. So that would be number one. I think number two is, we mentioned earlier about, you see job adverts where it's kind of saying, oh, you need 3 years experience as a junior to qualify for this role. That one's a tricky one. You've obviously, especially if you've just come out of university and all you've got is what you've done at uni, I'd say if you've done a placement year, then that's obviously a big advantage, right? So that's going to give you some ammunition to work with. We spoke about personal projects as well. If you can include some of that, I would say don't shy away from applying to those roles. Still try and apply. It might not go anywhere, but again, if you're showing skill sets and competencies that are valuable to that organization, there's still a chance you could get it. I think experience isn't the be all and end all. You can have somebody who fast tracks to being a senior designer, a lead designer, whatever it is, with less than what you see as the industry norm, right? Yeah. Oh, if I'm a lead designer, I need to have 10 plus years, whatever it is. I wouldn't say don't be hyper focused on that. Again, it's kind of, it's that, I guess it comes back to that quality over quantity kind of argument as well. Clearly experience has a role to play, of course, in terms of, exposing you to certain situations and whatever it is. But yeah, don't be put off by job adverts if they are kind of saying those things from an experience standpoint. I would say as well, don't just wait on the jobs to come to you. So don't just look at you might look at the job market and it's super dry because there's only like 3-4 jobs being advertised and everyone's applying for them. There's a ton of consultancies, there's a ton of in-house teams around the UK that might not be advertising, but they'll still look at your CV, they'll still, consider your portfolio, they'll probably, they'll probably have the time to look at that. So you might land a job off the back of something that's not even been advertised. If I take one of our recent interns who is on your course, Georgie, I don't know if you know Georgie.
Yeah, Georgie.
She approached us direct and asked if there was an internship available, and we made it happen because we liked what we saw. Like there was some really good work there, some nice thinking. We admired the fact that she'd reached out to us, which was again shows some passion, shows some kind of like keenness to get going. So I think don't shy away from that. Don't try to be direct if you can. If it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't go anywhere, right? There's more options that you can explore after that. Yeah. And again, finally, don't be disheartened if you don't get what you want out the gates. Like just if you do land a job and it's kind of you're starting to think maybe it's not for me. That's fine. Just take what you can from it, and you will learn stuff, even if it's not exactly what you'd hope to get. You're going to learn a ton. I certainly learned probably, I learned a significant amount in my first year out of uni, even compared to the 3 years that I'd done at university, right? If I look at how much I learned in that first job, it was crazy. It was insane. Yeah. So, that would be my advice. What courses are you both doing?
Both BA.
Same BA, yeah.
BA product design.
Yeah.
Are there any particular, do you guys have any passions or kind of, wants from a first job? Are there certain companies that you guys, or maybe not companies specifically, but are you more inclined to work for a specific brand, or are you looking at more maybe consultancy based work? Is there, where are your interests at the moment?
I think that's a good question because me and Millie are in quite different positions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we both did placements. I did mine in packaging at Pepsi.
Okay, cool.
So it's quite different to what we do at uni.
Yes.
And I kind of left that thinking, I don't know if packaging's for me, but I did really enjoy it.
Fine.
Which is good. But now I'm kind of in a position where I'm going to relocate up to Manchester. So I'm trying to find jobs and things. Okay. So at the moment I kind of see what is just out there and everything. But I think, research and insight is probably kind of what I'm favouring. But maybe, in-house as well, really good. So I'm trying to kind of reach out and make those connections. But it is hard.
No, definitely.
It is really hard, especially because it's quite far in advance.
Yes.
But Millie's is very different as well.
Mine's different. So I'm looking more at the teaching side of things at the moment. I also am really interested in like the consultancy side. So if I was going to go back towards the more design focused career, I think that's sort of where I'd want to go, but it is really daunting. I do
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
really
Of
nervous
course.
about the idea of being like, here's my work and
Yeah,
please
yeah,
judge
yeah.
it and then let me know what you think. But I think I definitely like the whole process and the teamwork and stuff.
Absolutely.
So that's the bit that I would probably be most interested in doing in
Great.
that sort of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
first steps are always the hardest. You know, it's kind of, you're putting yourself out there, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's you know, going from not much experience and not, you know, it's the unknown, I guess.
Yeah.
But you know, it's, you know, you'll get more confident as time goes on. But yeah, it's interesting what you said about packaging, because you kind of worked out, okay, maybe that's not for me. But I'm sure you still learn a ton from
crazy.
working, and
Yeah,
for quite
crazy
a big
amounts.
brand as well, like Pepsi. I'm sure there's so much you can take from that, and then again carry over, as we said earlier, into the next job where you're at interview being asked, you know, what value can you bring? You know, you can reference some of that and say,
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
okay, it was packaging based, fine. It's not, maybe it's not product design or, you know, whatever it is, but, you know, here's what I can bring based off of my experience there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was the main thing. It was like the first place I applied for, wasn't really kind of looking anywhere else. And it was the first place I applied for, job I got. I was kind of like, okay, well, I'm doing it. But yeah, and I came out of it and I was like, oh wow, like I've learned way more than I ever thought I would. And it's like, even when I'm doing projects now, it's like subconsciously always in there. I'm like, oh, like what machine would I use? What would the barrier properties be? And it's like, where did all this come from? But it's in there somewhere.
Definitely utilize that. You know, don't be afraid that even when you do progress on to another career, you know, wherever you go, is like bring that expertise with you, and kind of don't be afraid to, like, you know, flex those muscles and say, you know, oh, this is what I'm going to try and incorporate some of that here in this process, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's what I've realised as well. It's everything is transferable.
Yes.
Everything.
Absolutely.
Even if it's one thing you know about a certain material, you'll be able to kind of employ it into a different project. And then, it's really good.
Yeah. And in industrial design as well, as I said in the talk, is kind of, you know, you do a bit of graphic design, you know, you're working on like layouts and your portfolio, presenting things in a nice way, you know, you're touching on CMF, you're doing all sorts. So, you know, all the skills that you leave university with is so great. And I think when, certainly my experience in my career is, you know, I can influence maybe other departments as well. So like, I'm not a packaging designer. You know, I don't really know the first thing about it, but I can certainly provide some ideas and some kind of like, you know, maybe I feel that, you know, this could be this way, and it would really help sell that product a bit more on the shelf, you know, if we tried this. And being an industrial designer who knows how to use, you know, the Adobe suite or Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever it is, I can like quite quickly lash up some ideas and kind of communicate that. So again, it's a nice course to kind of, you know, have these offshoot kind of competencies as well.
Yeah. I guess as well, a lot of what design is like drawing parallels between other industries and other ways of doing things. So packaging design, even if you're not going into that in the future, everything you've learned, like you said, it can be transferred, but also they can learn from what you've learned in other jobs. And that's, I guess, where the variety can kind of play in favour.
It's a creative process, right? It's you know, you're learning how to present things creatively, design things creatively.
Yeah, I feel like become very well-rounded.
Yes.
An individual and in your skill set.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perspective Podcast with myself, Jess, and Millie. And thank you to Steve for coming on. It's been a really great episode with you. Make sure you tune in next week. We've got a lot more content coming. We'll see you next time. Bye.